In 1980, I worked as an office work inspector in the secretariat of the head office of our city. And under the program of voluntary assistance to agriculture, we, employees, were to go for a month to a sponsored collective farm. There were 20 people from different departments. From our secretariat, 2 people, me and my friend, the typist Galia. We arrived in the village, and it turned out that in the hostel, which we must provide, some domestic inconveniences had arisen. To put it simply, the crack went across the front of the building. We had to hurry to settle on private houses. And here we are standing in a circle, and we are called by the surnames and sent to wait for someone where. The turn came to us and Galia. You, they say, will live with the old Ivan Kozlov. We, young cheerful girls, were not happy about this turn, of course. Month at some grandfather. But we were worried for nothing. Ivan Ivanovich, our host, turned out to be a sturdy, cheerful, old-fashioned old man. A well-intentioned person, a merry fellow and a joker who knew many jokes and jokes. He loved us as relatives. He had the last name and was remembered for a lifetime. Firstly, Ivan Ivanovich lived with 2 goats. Galia and I first tried goat's milk, and secondly, standing up in the morning and smacking our lips from sleep, our grandfather proclaimed, "I'm going to try for you milk from my ladies. They respect me because I am their leader. And my last name is appropriate." We lived with our master, like Christ. In his bosom, in the hut, there is cleanliness and order, everywhere there are rugs and napkins, a small scape in a red corner, and flowers in pots on the windows. My grandfather didn't let us go to work at the collective farm. We worked on toku, grain, without a mug, although we fed up in the local canteen and fed, tasty and satisfying. Once we came from our shift tired, but happy, then, by youth, any work in joy was. They began to gather for dances, local for us, urban, almost every evening they were having fun. But they understood, we hardly have time to reach the other end of the village before the thunderstorm. They just thought our downpour of terrible power began right away, with wind, thunder, monstrous lightning. I have never seen such a thunderstorm. We look, our grandfather warmed the lamp before the image, crossed himself with a sneak. By the way, I am afraid of thunderstorms, my girlfriend also has eyes with a saucer. Do not be afraid, Ivan Ivanovich reassures us. In our collective farm, there are lightning rods on all the houses. The roof is not shy, and thoughtfully continued. Yes, now rarely such terrible thunderstorms rumble, maybe every 40 years rumbles. When such dooms happen, I always burn a candle or a lamp. I remember my wife. Did she die? Your wife, we asked Galia at the same time. In a thunderstorm? Maybe she died. Maybe she's alive, I do not know, grandfather answered. And it was so. Ivan Kozlov was a master of all trades. Particularly successful were the strong and fine beehives. They invited him to work even in the neighboring villages. Here, on one of the sweltering summer days that happen before a thunderstorm, Ivan hurried to catch home before dark, to his young wife, who wore their firstborn under their hearts. He left the neighboring village, where he stayed for work when the black clouds had already clung to the whole sky and the light blue lightning became purple. The wind rose, the distance rumbled more distinctly. Only Ivan stepped onto a country road, as a dog rushed from under him right out of his feet, a brown female with sunken sides and tails on his tail. The dog grinned, growled and flashed an eye, the other eye was covered with a catcher. Ivan swung his fist at her, cursed, and hurried home. His way lay through a small coppice. and from there it is not far from the house. According to the forest, Ivan ran at a run, because the wind grew stronger, branches broke, branches fell under his feet, in the sky rumbled so that the earth trembled. It was still a dry thunderstorm, but the guy knew a little more, and a shower would gush. Suddenly, from behind the bushes, the same dog rushed under his feet again. Ivan picked up a stick from the ground, and the beast retreated. Maybe mad, the guy though, and without letting go of the stick, he continued on his way. Passing the buckwheat field, Ivan descended into a small ravine, where a streamlet flowed. Getting out of it, I heard hoarse breathing behind my back. He turned around, and behind him, at arm's length, stood the old dog. Swinging a stick, Ivan only wanted to frighten the animal, but he hit the dog on the nose, and she fell head over heels into the stream. What was the strength? The guy rushed to the house. With the first drops of rain crossed his threshold, the first thing that caught his eye was white, like chalk, the dazed face of his young pregnant wife. With a trembling hand, she pointed to the old woman, who, cowering, was sitting on a long bench near the stove. "Here," said his wife with horror in her voice, "this madman has fallen into the hut. All shakes, says nothing." The old woman sat hunched over in a dark scarf pulled over her eyes, from which only the tip of her nose was sticking out. Stubby cones stuck to a faded brown sweater with outstretched sleeves. The burdock, the wet hem of a dark skirt and bare feet were wet and dirty. "You give her a cup of hot water?" the wife asked. "I am afraid to approach her myself. See how shaking it, a disease?" Ivan opened the damper from the stove, bent down to pull up a pot of iron with boiling water, and from behind his robe, a small cross dropped into the slit of his shirt. Only the guy managed to notice a terrible look that flashed from under his headscarf. One of the old woman's eyes was caught in a thorn. Insane jumped from the bench, rushed to the door, stumbled with her foot on the threshold and found herself on the street. Immediately above the house, there was such a strong rumble of thunder that glass shook in the windows. Ivan ran out on the porch but saw no one. Only streaks of lightning split the sky apart. Less than a month later, as the wife, coming out of the hut with a rag of dirty water, stumbled on the threshold, fell, badly hurt, and soon lost her child. Has thrown off, as they said. After that, the young woman locked herself in, didn't talk to anyone, didn't react to anything, and then began to leave the house altogether. Ivan with the help of fellow villagers caught her and brought her home. But the day came when the woman disappeared without a trace. My friend and I sat quietly, listening to the story of Ivan's grandfather, did not for a moment doubt his veracity. As if guessing our thoughts, Ivan Ivanovich went to the door leading to the passage and pointing at the faint furrows that were barely visible, but still visible to the eye, said, "Here they are, these traces that the old woman left when she ran away. Is this a man? Werewolf? I already painted over them and plastered them, to no avail. In time, they still come out. But you girls, do not be afraid. It has been a long time since nothing like this has happened. For some reason, there was no fear. True. Now, leaving the house, we know no, yes, and looked at the traces of a werewolf.